Welcome back to Learn Fun English. In today's episode, we're going to tackle a fascinating topic: how to train your brain to think in English. Many language learners struggle with this aspect, but today we'll share effective strategies that can help shift your mindset and make English your go-to thought language. So let's dive in and unlock the secrets to thinking in English.
Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we're going to be doing a deep dive into something I know a lot of you have been asking about: training your brain to think in English. And for this, we're looking at an article from the language learning platform Weaponry called How to Train Your Brain to Think in English.
Yeah, this is a really good one. And I think it starts off really well by kind of acknowledging right away that thinking in another language, it's a subconscious process, right? So you can't just like flip a switch and suddenly be thinking in English.
Exactly. It's like you're trying to change your mind's default settings or something. So where do we even begin?
Well, the article gives us 4 tips, and the first one is pretty simple. Start with individual words.
Okay, so instead of seeing a mesa and thinking table in my native language, I should just think table in English.
Exactly.
But how does that actually help me become more fluent?
It's all about building those connections in your brain, right? Every time you make that direct association, you're strengthening the pathway for that English word in your mind.
Huh, interesting. I never thought about it that way. So the article mentions gradually adding in verbs and adjectives and stuff. So once I've mastered table, then I can move on to brown table or eating at the table.
Exactly. You're gradually building complexity, right?
That makes sense. But what happens when you encounter a word that you just don't know? Do you immediately grab a dictionary?
Well, that's what most of us would do, but the article suggests a different approach. Try describing it in English, using the vocabulary that you already know.
Oh, that's kind of cool. So if I didn't know the word streetlight, I could say it's a tall thing with a light on top that shines at night.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
wouldn't it just be easier to look it up?
It might seem that way,
Yeah.
but when you describe something, you're actively engaging with the language, and that effort actually helps you remember the word better.
Oh, I see. So it's like actively solving a puzzle instead of just looking at the picture on the box.
Right.
This reminds me of when I was learning the word serendipity. I was reading this article and I came across it and I didn't know what it meant. But instead of looking it up, I tried to guess the meaning from the context, and I was actually pretty close. And that word has stuck with me ever since.
Yeah, that's a great example.
So we've gone from single words to descriptions. How do we make the leap to thinking in full sentences?
Well, that's tip number 3, and it might take a week or even a month. But the key is to gradually shift from thinking in single words to constructing complete sentences in your mind.
Okay, so instead of just bird, I should think the bird is singing in the tree. But doesn't that require perfect grammar?
Well, the article makes a good point here. It says that, fluency in everyday conversation, it doesn't require perfect grammar.
Oh, thank goodness. So I shouldn't be afraid to make mistakes when I'm practicing.
Yeah, don't let the fear of making mistakes hold you back.
That's great, because I think sometimes, I can get hung up on that. All right, so now for the final tip. This is where it gets really interesting.
Yeah, this one might sound a little unusual at first, but the article suggests having conversations with yourself in English.
Wait, hold on. Are you suggesting that I should be having full-blown debates with myself in English? People are going to think I'm crazy.
Well, you don't have to be that dramatic about it,
Yeah.
but you can think of it as practicing internal monologues.
So recapping my day or planning out my to-do list?
Exactly.
And that's supposed to help.
It's all about practice, right? It's like mental rehearsal for having actual conversations.
Okay, I think I'm starting to get it, but this is only for advanced learners, right?
Not at all. Even beginners could benefit.
Wow. This has been a great start to our deep dive. We've covered so many helpful tips already, but I'm ready for more. What else does the article have in store for us?
All right, so we've covered some really good foundational techniques, but are you ready to kind of level up?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Hit me with it.
So the article goes on to give us some bonus strategies.
Uh-huh.
And one of the most powerful is immersion.
Immersion. Okay, so surrounding myself with as much English content as possible.
Exactly. Yeah, but what does that actually mean? Does that mean I should just have English music playing in the background all the time?
Not quite. The article specifically recommends actively engaging with English media, like watching TV shows or movies, reading books, or even listening to podcasts like this one.
Uh-huh. So it's not just about having English sounds around me. It's about really focusing on understanding what I'm hearing or reading.
Exact.
So for example, if I'm watching a movie, instead of just passively watching it, I should maybe try to predict what a character might say next.
Or try summarizing the plot points in English.
Oh, that's a good idea. Or like if I'm reading a book, maybe I could pause every now and then and try to reflect on the themes of the characters.
Just do it in English.
In English, of course. Okay, so that's immersion. What else?
Well, this next one might sound a little strange, but the article suggests narrating your day in English? Wait, you mean like literally talking to myself as I'm going about my day? Like, okay, I'm walking to the kitchen now, opening the refrigerator, grabbing the milk, pouring a glass. People are going to think I'm crazy.
But you can always do it in your head.
Okay, that makes me feel a little bit better. But I mean, is that really going to make a difference?
It might seem silly, but it really forces you to think in English,
Yeah.
even for the most mundane tasks.
And that helps solidify those everyday vocabulary words and phrases.
I see. But wouldn't that get exhausting after a while?
It can be mentally taxing at first, but like any workout,
Yeah.
it gets easier with practice.
True. So we've got immersion, we've got narration. Anything else?
All right, this next tip might sound a little counterintuitive, but the article says, make mistakes.
Hold on. Are you encouraging me to make mistakes?
Not intentionally, of course, but the point is, don't be afraid to make mistakes.
Oh, okay. So it's more about like viewing mistakes as opportunities to learn and improve rather than as failures.
Exactly. See them as feedback. Don't let the fear of messing up prevent you from practicing. You know, I think a lot of language learners, myself included, we get so caught up in trying to be perfect that we end up being too afraid to actually speak.
Yeah, I think that's very common.
Yeah.
But the more comfortable you are with making mistakes, the faster you'll learn.
Okay, I like that. So we've talked about immersion narration and embracing mistakes. Any other secret weapons you want to share?
Here's one that I find particularly helpful. Use imagery.
Imagery.
Yeah, so when you come across a new word or phrase, try to create a vivid mental picture associated with it.
So like if I was learning the word exuberant, I might picture someone like jumping for joy with a huge smile on their face.
Exactly.
Oh, I like that. It's like turning vocabulary learning into an art project.
Exactly. Now, as we wrap up these bonus techniques, I want to emphasize one really important thing. Be patient.
Right. Rome wasn't built in a day. You can't expect to train your brain to think in English overnight.
Exactly. Don't get discouraged if you don't see results immediately.
It's a marathon, not a sprint.
Exactly. Just be consistent with your practice. And most importantly, enjoy the journey.
Okay, so we've talked about a lot of great techniques, but I'm curious about the bigger picture here. Why is thinking in English so important? What are the real benefits?
Yeah, so we've explored a ton of practical tips for training our brains to think in English. But, I'm kind of curious about, like, the so what factor. Why is this mental shift so important?
Well, I think that's a great question, and this is where it gets really interesting. Because thinking in English, it isn't just a mental exercise, it's the key to unlocking real fluency and confidence in the language.
Okay, now you've got my attention.
So imagine you're having conversation in English, right? But in the back of your mind, you're constantly translating from your native language. It's exhausting, and it really slows you down.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It's like, I don't know, trying to juggle. While riding a unicycle, you're so focused on not falling that you can't really enjoy the act of juggling.
Exactly. And that's what it's like when you're constantly translating in your head. But when you think in English, you eliminate that translation step. Your thoughts flow directly into words, and you can communicate so much more naturally. So it's about being present in the conversation, not stuck in my own head.
Right.
But how does that actually translate to like real fluency improvement?
Well, when you're not translating all the time,
Mm-hmm.
you can process information faster and respond more quickly, which leads to smoother conversations, better comprehension, and just like an overall greater sense of ease when you're speaking.
Okay, I see what you mean. It's like the difference between reading a translated book and reading the original version.
Exactly.
You're getting the pure, unfiltered meaning without any intermediary steps.
Right. And this shift, it also impacts other areas of language acquisition, like your listening comprehension improves because you're no longer mentally translating everything you hear.
And what about writing?
Your writing also becomes more natural and expressive because you're thinking in English, not just translating your thoughts onto paper.
Wow, it's like all the pieces of the language puzzle suddenly fall into place.
Exactly. And here's something else that I find really fascinating. When you start to think in English, you might even start to perceive the world differently.
Really? How so?
Well, you might start to notice nuances in the language or pick up on idioms and cultural references more easily.
That's
You
interesting.
might even start to dream in English.
Whoa, hold on. Dream in English. That's like a whole new level.
It's a sign that the language has really become a part of you. It's no longer just a tool for communication, it's shaping your thoughts and perceptions.
That's incredible. But isn't this way of thinking like something that just comes naturally to some people? Can anyone really train their brain to think in English?
Absolutely. It's not about having some innate language ability. It's about consistent effort and practice. Remember all those tips we talked about? Building associations, narrating your day, immersing yourself in English content. They all contribute to making this mental shift.
So with enough dedication, anyone can rewire their brain to think in English.
Exactly.
Wow, this has been an incredibly insightful deep dive.
I'm glad you think so.
We've gone from these really practical techniques to like the deeper why behind thinking in English, and I feel truly inspired to make this shift in my own language learning.
That's fantastic to hear. And just remember, it's a journey, not a race.
Right.
Be patient with yourself.
Uh-huh.
Celebrate your progress. And most importantly, have fun with it.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Well, that's all the time we have for today's deep dive. A huge thanks to you for joining us, and we'll see you next time for another fascinating exploration into the world of language learning.
Thank you for joining us for today's episode on training your brain to think in English. We hope these strategies inspire you to practice and make thinking in English a natural part of your daily life. Remember, the more you immerse yourself, the easier it becomes. Don't forget to share your experiences in the comments and be sure to subscribe for more tips and tricks. Until next